Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest episode of the Fireside with Founders and Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Rupert McSheehy. This time, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Antony Thompson, former Royal Marine and co-founder of Loopin. So I got to talk to Antony all about his past and how he got into the Marines, then why he left, and looking forward to where he is now with Loopin. We talked all about how they're on a mission to ensure that business leaders and companies can reduce burnout from their staff, reduce turnover, all with the help of powerful AI that can save them time and money. I really hope you enjoy listening to this one, so grab yourself a nice seat, cup of tea, beer, wine, whatever takes your fancy, and enjoy listening or watching. So, Antony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rupert.
Oh, nice to see you. Thank you for joining, and I'm really looking forward to touching upon, I think, what will be some pretty interesting subjects, matter and topics for the listeners today. So, look, let's sort of jump straight in. So, as I've just mentioned, sort of former Royal Marine. So, you spent 9 years of your life as part of the Marines. So, just first and foremost, wanted to explore that in terms of, you know, why you went into the Marines, and then we can start to talk about sort of where you are now as part of Loopin, and sort of see where that goes. But if you can tell us a bit more about, you know, say your journey in the Royal Marines, please.
Absolutely. I mean, I fundamentally joined the Marines because I was operating in circles which weren't conducive towards those high ambitions I had as a 14, 15-year-old. I was very much succumbed to the realities of living in then what was described as the graveyard of ambition. It's really not. It's not that bad, but in Norfolk, in Norwich.
Yeah, it's not a bad city. I've lived in Norwich myself. I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, I think I succumbed to the people who I was surrounding myself with too regularly.
Okay.
Great people, but not where I was. And I think, you know, reality was that I wanted to do something different. And my best friend, Mike, he said, "Look, mate, I'm going to go and join the Navy as a Royal Navy diver." And I said, "Bloody good idea. I'm going to do the same. Let's go for it."
Yeah.
And so we went to the Armed Forces Careers Office on the same day, and whilst he was getting interviewed by the captain or sub-lieutenant, whoever was at the Armed Forces Careers Office, there was a big corporal behind the desk, and he kind of looked up and he was like, "You're a pretty big chap." So I used to swim. Competitively. He said, "You're a pretty big chap. Do you reckon you can do 5 pull-ups?" You know, 19 years old, pretty cocky, pretty arrogant. Yeah, I'll smash them out. So I did 5 pull-ups, and he said, "Would you fancy joining the Royal Marines?" And I think the motivation to say, "Yes, give me the papers, I'll go and take them home and I'll deliver them back in a few days," really came from something which was etched much earlier in my life. When, you know, I grew up not knowing my father doesn't know me. And my grandfather was always I held him in very high regard. He was always a very kind person, a very values-orientated man, and a lot of people loved him.
Yeah.
And obviously when his funeral was, you know, way more people than anyone anticipated. And so I just thought, wow, what a guy. But he used to share his passions with me. And one of those passions was World War II, World War I, so on and so forth. And he took me on a Normandy expedition one time. And it just so happened that we met this chap called Jim Tuft. Now, Jim Tuft was a former Royal Marines commander, as we later came to find out. But we were stood at Pegasus Bridge. I don't know if you've ever been to Pegasus Bridge in Normandy. And there used to be this tank that was sat on the side. And Jim turned around when we arrived at this Pegasus Bridge, having a little look around. He said, "Well, that's my tank." And, you know, curious 13-year-old, I was like, what do you mean? He said, "Well, here's some photos of me as the tank commander on D-Day." And I was like, "Oh my," it had the same serial number and everything like that. I was like, "This is amazing. This is incredible." So I thought, this guy. And so what happened after that, we kind of built this relationship with my grandfather and Jim, and we went down to Rochester where he lived, rung the bell in the cathedral, and just everything about Jim. In that moment when that corporal asked me, "Do you want to become a Royal Marines commander?" I remembered, and I thought, actually, I'm seeking something different here. I'm seeking a different environment. I want to be part of a group of people who share the same values as me. Yeah,
So,
I'm in. Let's do the
yeah.
5 pull-ups. Let's sign away. And that was
5
that.
pull-ups and in.
Yeah.
Old school recruitment, right?
Yeah.
In terms
Yeah.
of, onboarding into the forces in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure they do it slightly differently these days. And some of the projects I know that we've had people working on, especially for the Navy, actually, in terms of a big project that one of our customers was working on for there. But I think sometimes there's a lot in that, in terms of that sort of that's more, old school is probably the only way I can really describe it off the top of my head, but it sort of really captures the imagination, and people go, I'm up for it. Let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
So I guess the rest was history.
Yeah, pretty much. We went, as the part of the aptitude, physical, medical. Then you spend a few days down at Limpston, see if you can cut the mustard. Then you go through all of training, and there's multiple drop-offs throughout training. And yeah, I had nearly 10 happy years, really happy years in the Marines. Loved it.
So I suppose that probably gave you a bit of a footing for where you are now. But I know that from people that I know who have sort of come out of the forces, you always sort of think of what's next. Some go in for a shorter period of time. If they go through the whole sort of officer training course go to Sandhurst. Some people stay in the forces for a lot longer than others, but invariably, most people come out at some stage or another, unless you stay in there and you work your way up through the ranks and go and do something different. So when you got to that point whereby you were sort of at the sort of the pivot point, if you like, saying, right, I've done this now, I've been in the Marines for a heck of a long time, I'm now ready to do something else. What were your sort of thoughts, and how did you go about thinking about what you would do next?
I mean, probably something we haven't discussed, but I was actually medically discharged.
Okay.
I spent a big portion of my time in intelligence, sort of 5-6 years of my career in intelligence. I managed to do a couple of tours in Afghan as well. One as a rifleman as a front forward Marine, and the second one was as an intelligence analyst. And after that, I then went into the officers training, and during officers training and towards the back end of it, I picked up an injury which was altering in a way I had not even conceived at the time. And so they put me on this rehab program. This rehab program lasted about 2 years. And, interestingly enough, because I already had a green beret, I was already a lieutenant. So I was able to go and be seconded into different parts of the military for 6 months here, 4 months here. And I had some really great exposure to some things I probably would never have done had I gone the normal route. So that was really great. But whilst I was trying to do the rehab off the back of this injury that I'd picked up in Brecon Beacons, of all the places I've been in the world, Brecon Beacons was the one that finished me off. Bit annoying.
It's always Wales.
And at the end of two years rehab, they took a decision that it was not going to get any better. And, there's kind of 2 parts of your body that you really need to be a Royal Marines commando, and that's your ankles and your knees. And my ankle was completely, broken in a way which was unrepairable or irreparable. And that was it. That was kind of like it came to a very shuddering halt.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? And we went through this process of going to the careers transition partnership. That's their bit, which they help you to transition. And of course, I must have done 33 iterations of my CV, I know the number exactly, 256 job applications, all to be told, no, we don't have a place for you. Yeah. Obviously, things were getting pretty desperate at that time, because I had about a month before, this is March 2017, I had about a month before I was out. And then a month later, so in May, my second child, my son, was going to be born.
Okay.
And I was looking down the lens going, I've got 2 kids, my wife, family to support, no prospects of a job. How am I going to actually sustain my family?
Yep.
And I went into a period of unemployment for about 6-7 months. That was a really, really tough time, because fundamentally, my wife's amazing. She's an absolutely brilliant person. But fundamentally, I was the breadwinner at the time. for where we are, and I obviously wasn't winning any bread.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a really difficult place. And then, sort of 2-3 months into this unemployment, I found myself a mentor. I found myself a coach who was able to help translate the skills that I had earned and be able to translate them into something which was tangible and digestible for corporate to understand. And I found myself 3 months later, through networking as well, in a management consultancy position.
Yeah, which often seems to be a route that I've seen people take from the forces, going into management consultancy. I think there are a lot of attributes, and as you say, I think, again, having the ability to go, I've spent so much time in one place and space, and that's what the outside world is kind of different to sort of being in the forces. Not that I've been in the forces, I must sort of disclaim now, but my understanding of people that I've spoken to, it's a very different world. And a lot of the time you've got some really transferable skills that are super useful in the real world. And a lot of the stuff that you get from being in the forces as part of the training is, again, it's super transferable, especially in the consultancy world, whereby, it's quite sort of a regimented process in terms of the things that they often do in the consultancy world. And even that we're a consultancy, as my business is a recruitment consultancy, we have processes. If you can follow instructions and stick to the processes and believe in the processes, generally it works. So I think, having some of those very simple attributes though can be really big, but you don't necessarily know that you've got them unless someone tells you. So probably my question is, how did you go about realizing sort of when you needed a coach, and how did you find that coach? Because there's all sorts of people out there these days who are selling their services as a coach to come and help you, and you don't know who's good and who's not. So how did you work that out?
I ended up going to a number of the charities and basically saying, look, I'm pretty screwed here. I need some help, and I don't really know where to look. And so the charity that came forward for me was SAFA. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like sailors. I can't remember, Air Force and Army, something like that. Anyway. And they said, look, we've got this mentorship program, and this is what we're going to get out the back end of it. You can understand a little bit more about yourself, understand about the skills that you could give to the workplace, and really we're just going to give you that mentor that time to explain some of the challenges that you're going through. And I think, there's a big part where they have to do this check to see, are you somebody who's suffering from PTSD, or are you somebody that just needs a little bit of help, or to get to, the foot up and over the wall? Unfortunately for me, I was the person that needed the foot up and to get over the wall.
Yeah.
And that was, there were multiple complexities anyway, but that really helped focus my attention at the skills that I needed to give. And I think your point around talking about going into processes and that sort of regimented philosophy and work attitude, there was also a massive amount of training that sat behind that to then get everyone up to that skill, to that standard. And this is one of the things which, the ideas that I want to bring is like the standards are also set very, very high. And what you have is a group of people who surround themselves with people who are adopting the similar standards. And when they're not adopting the standards and they're not conducting themselves in the way in which the standards are, they're able to call them out. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting place to be. And I think when I went into consultancy, we went in as a new team into a big project, and I found myself in a place where it was almost like a startup mentality.
Okay.
Because they needed to fix this program. We kind of came in as like the Ghostbusters, but not the Ghostbusters, the A team. But it was a really high performing team, and we kind of had this multidisciplined team. One person was a tech, one person was sort of an Excel wizard, and one person was a generalist, and one person was a specialist for BA, business analyst, and I was just kind of bolted on as the person who might be able to do reporting well and still sort of misunderstood. But I've come to realize over time that I'm actually really good at being a generalist. So that's one of the skills that you really gain, is being able to see things from a big view in the military, particularly. And because there are so many different parts of the military over time, you're able to see multiple things and think about things outside of the box, which gives you that sort of generalist attitude. I mean, there's lots of people who go away and become specialists in what they do, particularly now when there's a lot of guys and girls who are leaving who go into cyber. That's kind of a very standard route at the moment. And there is a big gap in skills for those in cyber. So at the time, obviously, cyber wasn't as hot as what it is now. And, you know, who knows, I might have ended up down that route. But I found myself in a consultancy. So
just so happens that was the path that you took, and it played reasonably well, I guess, to then your strengths at the time.
Yeah, massively. It allowed me to practice what I thought I knew in a reasonably safe environment, get better at that, understand that. And then just through, a change of geographies, I moved to a different consultancy. But at the same time, I always had this hankering for creating something of my own. I really wanted to have something of my own. And I felt that there was an opportunity to give something back. That's how I started. I just started giving back to people I didn't, weren't charging at the time. And I created this like community fit club and so on and so forth. And I just thought there's a real good opportunity to give back what I know in a different format that people can gain something from. Because somebody said something to me one time. They said, because I challenged them, I think it might have even been my mentor, Al. I said, it was my mentor, Al. And I said, I'm not sure I could really be of any value to anyone. That it was kind of like a really defeatist mindset when I first went in. And he said, well, don't you think in the last 10 years, you will have learned something that somebody is at the same stage you were that could benefit from that 10 years of understanding and guidance and wisdom, which you've managed to gain, and give that back to them to help them go 1 year, 2 years into that journey. And I kind of really thought about that. And I was like, maybe there is. And so I just started doing it. I just started practicing that in my own time and doing coaching, trying to become a coach and so on and so forth. And that was it. I love that. I fundamentally still love doing a lot of that and giving my advancements in my personal journey, looking at where somebody is starting their personal journey and just going, look, if there's any tweaks, any sort of painful pitfalls I can help you avoid, then let's have that conversation.
Avoid them. It's really interesting because I think we all have, most people have an element of imposter syndrome built into them, and they think, okay, well, it's like you were saying just then, what have I got to give? And actually, your experience is what you've got to give, and whether that experience is, 5 years, 10 years, 10 months, 10 weeks, whatever it might be, it's the experience that you can then impart on someone else to say, well, this is what happened to me in this scenario. And even if it's not directly related, like say coming out of the Marines, whereby it's not necessarily going to be directly related to software or building some sort of company or product, but there's loads of things that you can take out of it. For example, what really resonated with me was when you were talking about that high performing team and that culture whereby if it's not working well, and if it's there's someone who's not pulling their weight, the rest of the team can call that person out, but they can also call that person out but help them to get back to where they are at a high performing level. It's not calling them out and saying you're on the sideline, see you later, you're ousted. It's about being that having that culture of bringing everyone through together to create a high performing team, high performing company. And that's kind of what, I suppose better than me, but my view of the Marines is that's how, that's all set up, and that's why it works so well. That's why it's the best of the best, is because you all perform together in a way that is cohesive and there's no one letting the side down. So I'd imagine there's lots of things that you could take from that into the management consultancy, but also then sort of building a business as you are now.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to go back to that standards piece, which you're talking about there. It's that is drilled into you at like day one, week one. It's all about standards. It's all about all in together. One in, all in is the classic phrase that you'll hear. And alongside that, that's also etched into you is a value system. And so the values aren't just the values that are on the wall. they're in every part of what you do. And those values split into spirit and into the team. So I think, you see a lot of companies now and they've got their values, and sometimes they're just values that are plucked, words that are plucked, and they go, these are our values. And everybody goes, I don't understand the values. Because there's been no understanding, there's been no real meaning and connection with those words. What do they mean, and what do they mean to me? And how do I ensure that when I see that value being crossed, I can also have I also have the ability to, as well as the responsibility to call that out and support that person. Or, depending on who it is, sometimes you get the negative character in there, and sometimes that person just doesn't fit the organization. And this is the major difference, which I think, I've experienced now between being in the Marines and going through that process of training, because training is that opportunity where, it isn't just survival of the fittest, because some of the fittest people left really early doors.
Yeah.
It was survival of the people that really believed and really took into themselves the culture, the values, and held themselves to an account, a high degree of accountability. And I think that's really important when you're transitioning those types of skills into creating a business. You've got to look out for those. You've got to understand those. You've got to really figure out, what values are important. What culture do I want to try and create here? And I'm going to hold my hands up. When I first started the business with Ben, we didn't really know, because we obviously Marines, where we are in the business world, and there's somewhere in between. And sometimes I think we went far too much to the other side of being, well, we can't say that, and we mustn't hold that there, and actually we just need to look after everybody, because that's the most important thing. Whilst you need to look after everybody, you still need to have those standards. And I think it's like the pendulum swung way too far to begin with. We had to bring it back to go, actually, this is what we expect. These are the types of people that we want in this organization. And if you do want this and you can continue, you can adapt and overcome and be that, great, stay, of course. But then also the opportunity to go, actually, if you're resisting that change, from the off, like I say, we got it wrong. But if you're resisting that change because this is really where we want it to be, then fundamentally, this is how we're going to take it forward. And this might not be the right outfit for you. And so I think when considering creating that business, it's identifying the values, identifying the standards, and then finding out the mechanisms for how you're going to maintain both of those things. And that's really important to communicate to your team. So one of the techniques which we've got now, or the tips, I suppose, is rather less of a technique, but more of a tip, is when you're writing your job description, be very, very clear about what type of environment those people are going into. Very clear, because they need to know up front. If you say it's one thing and then you deliver something else,
they're going to leave.
They're going to 100% leave, or you end up going, I just wish I was a little bit more honest on my job description, because you're not the person that I really wanted. I wanted someone different. And I think that being very open and honest within the job description is by far one of the best ways to attract the right type of talent into your organization.
It's so true. And not by any stretch of the imagination saying he is the perfect businessman, but someone who is a good example of doing this is Elon Musk, right? In terms of, he is, at least for all of his many other flaws that people may call out, he's very honest about the environment. He's like, you're going to have to work long hours and it's going to be tough, but we're going to build this amazing thing and do great things, or whatever it might be. And he's not sort of, sugarcoating it and saying, yeah, it's going to be an easy ride. And, if you want to stay, you stay. But if you don't, you don't. And that's also fine. Like, you don't have to be here. And I think that's such an important thing to do, because so many companies are so worried about attracting the right talent, which is, again, it's important, but not at the detriment of retaining the right talent, and not at the detriment of, as you say, the values of the business, which probably leads me nicely into sort of a bit of a segue about Loopin. So obviously you mentioned there your co-founder, Ben, also former Royal Marine. So I don't think I probably need to introduce the fact that you both met as Marines in the business, or no? Okay. So how did you meet Ben?
Yeah. So it was at the same time when I probably was 4 or 5 months into my consultancy career, and I created the side hustle, the coaching side hustle, as we all do. And Ben was on his way out of the Marines as well, and he'd created the coaching side hustle. And we spotted each other on LinkedIn. And I thought, well, I need to know what he's up to. And he thought, I need to know what he's up to. And we kind of got on this really elongated LinkedIn. He didn't reply to me for ages, 3-4 months. And playing it cool.
Hard to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had got to the point where we went on this 15-minute call. We kind of positioned it and we said, let's jump on a call 15 minutes, check each other out. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, we kind of just said to each other, maybe it makes sense if we do it together. Maybe it makes sense if we carve this up and we actually just go in, set some ground rules, set some values. Well, the values are already really set because we both came from a very value-driven place. But if we could do this together, imagine what we could go on to achieve. And so we just did it. We created a business within sort of 2-3 weeks. I remember getting on the calls with Ben, and Ben was, drawing out what the logo looks like. Terrible logo in hindsight, but still we started it. I mean, our original business was called Vanguard Global Solutions, and the way in which we came up for the name, I remember sitting on the call. I was in some hotel in London on a consultancy work late at night, 8-9 o'clock at night, done all the normal work, and I kind of like, well, we should probably call ourselves something, shouldn't we? Yeah, we should. Right. Okay. All right. Vanguard. Vanguard's an amazing name. Yeah. Let's do Vanguard because Vanguard is the most disruptive unit in a Greek formation. Let's be Vanguard. Completely negating the fact that there's a huge business out there called Vanguard Group.
Your SEO has absolutely failed on that one.
Yeah, big time. And then we got into the conversation. We're like, okay, well, what do we want to go and do? Well, we know we want to be global, so let's create global. Yeah, Vanguard Global. That sounds good. We probably need one more word after it just to, fine tune the message. Solutions, because we just do solutions. Yeah. Now, and then we're like, yeah, let's abbreviate it. VGS. That's what we're going to be. And that was it. And just the Spartan helmet with the laurels at the back of it, and just VGS etched in the bottom. And we were very proud of that. And when we first went into our first big business call, they were like, oh, you're here to do security solutions? We were like, no, what gives you that idea? They were like,
Vanguard.
Yeah, your logo and your name. And we were like, okay, no, we're just coming to do coaching about people. And they were like, that's a huge mismatch. Yeah. Anyway, we still ended up working with them, which was pretty good. So
it reminds me a bit. Have you seen the Will Ferrell film Step Brothers, where they come up with that company? I can't remember even what it's called now, something worldwide, but it seems a bit like that sort of story of just creating this. We want to call it, want it to be worldwide. We're going to call it worldwide. It's going to be global.
It really was that. And then we just kind of believed it. We were like, yeah, VGS all the way. And we started the coaching consulting company. We started working with some really big brands. We worked with HSBC, then Facebook, VW, Man United, Wasps Rugby, like a whole host of big household brands, and not just like the occasional workshop. For HSBC, we did 4,500 people on one of the Engage programs, and that was a really successful program that we delivered to them, and things were flying. We were almost hitting terminal velocity just before we go into Loopin, but we were hitting almost terminal velocity, and then COVID rolled in and completely disrupted the business model.
Yeah.
And I'd pushed for tech for quite a long time. Ben had sort of bought into it a little bit, but still a bit like, we should really do this because this is what we're good at. And I was like, no, let's go and do something we have no idea about. And, maybe we might stand a chance at creating something. And kind of COVID was that excuse to go and do that thing.
Yeah.
But we'd become really fixated on these 3 problems that we'd noticed working with all these big brands, working with all, it's a multitude of different brands in there. And it was just a problem that was everywhere, these 3 problems. And the first problem was teams didn't trust one another. And obviously we came from a world where trust was the ultimate thing. Trust was the thing that if you didn't have trust, like the mission would be unsuccessful.
Yeah. You've got to
because
know that that person's got your back, right? That,
100%,
yeah.
100%. There really has to be that true, almost physiological belief that the person to the left and to the right of you have got you covered.
Yeah.
And that's felt throughout the entire team. And so trust for us was like, oh my God, how are these teams even getting on in the world? Because like no one trusts each other.
Yeah.
And so we saw that as a real problem. And, the second problem was managers are completely overworked, or kind of still are really. And COVID has really not helped that in many ways, but they're kind of sitting in the control room of their team and there's all these levers and they're going, which one do we pull? Oh,
yeah,
no, not that one. I've annoyed that person. They were really in really high focus mode. So I've got that wrong. And that person needed my support. And I missed that completely because they went quiet on me and I didn't really understand what's happening. And then you as the manager become completely overwhelmed. And I think being overwhelmed is a state of really a series of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
That's how we become seriously overwhelmed. It's going, oh my God, next question. I haven't even asked them question 1 yet. And I'm on question 10.
Yeah.
And that creates like this almost bubble of anxiety, and anxiety is in part with being overwhelmed as well. And so this big problem was we need to give the managers something that they need to do when they need to do it, but it's not got to be time consuming. So that was the second problem. And the third big problem that we noticed was companies were using lagging indicators, engagement surveys, individual polls, or whatever it might be to create their people strategies, and then wondering why 6 months down the line, these strategies are not working and people have left and there's a retention issue and so on and so forth. And so really where we saw an opportunity as a solution for that was they really need leading indicators. They need something which is going to tell them what's coming, at least tell them what's happening today in the moment and what's going to come in the future. And that's really where our sort of passion originated from solving those three fundamental problems in the workplace.
Nice. And so in terms of the product, let's delve into sort of the product itself. So those are the problems that it's solving. How's it solving those problems?
So what we've done is we've created a trifecta business. In essence, is create something for the user, create something for the manager, and created something for the exec / director / department lead. And that's really difficult to do because you kind of need to service all three of them equally.
Yeah.
But you don't have millions of pounds to do it.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So you kind of have to just keep in the game long enough until you build the thing that you're trying to eventually get to. So the users, managers, or everyone checks in for 10 seconds a day. And really sort of the compulsion is that if we just do this simple check-in for 10 seconds a day, no more, it's not random questioning. It's not high degree of variance. It's minimal variance, but repeatable. We can do our jobs much better, as in the managers, as in the execs. We can make more informed decisions in the now, as opposed to doing a lengthy 50-question engagement survey, which only comes around twice a year. But again, it's a single point in time. So this 10-second check-in is kind of the crux of a lot of where we get that data from. And because the ultimate thing is we wanted to improve the data. And so what we've also done as well is in exchange for that data capture, we've given people if you like, an async water cooler per team. So I can understand my team a little bit better. I can see how my team are doing. I can see, and anyone that's in that team. So I can share support. I can share kudos. I can begin to understand them on a more human level, which I think, I'll bring it in a bit later if we've got time. But one of the key things we need to do as we move forward into this future of work is, guess what? AI is coming, and it's coming rapidly.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to create a place where people actually could see where their data goes, because that's the problem with surveys, is you never see where the data goes. You just submit this thing on a Friday, question. Oh my God, I can't, there's no enthusiasm when you do it. Maybe the first time you do it, like, good, yeah, it's going to go somewhere. And then the next Friday you realize that nothing happens.
Nothing changes. And you just end up flying through the questions, and people do it very lazily, almost mindlessly, not thinking about the first couple of questions they might answer, wholeheartedly and sensibly. But after that, they tend to, once they get to sort of the 30th question, they're like, oh God, when's this going to end?
Yeah, it's literally that. And so what we've created is a platform. It integrates into Slack now. We will be on Teams in 2 months, I believe.
Awesome.
And the idea is that we didn't want to create another web application or another app or whatever it might be, where, again, people are going to spend their time toggling and, oh, I've got to go and do my check-in over here. Let's just make it integrated where people are, meet people where they are. That's a big thing, a big theme of what we're trying to do at Loopin as well, and not take away time, give time back by knowing exactly what to do. And so by building up that data capture, we're like I say, we're really a data analytics company, but for people. Like, that's fundamentally what we do. And by building that picture, you can feed it through a series of criteria that, you know, our brilliant former head of product, Jack, had built. You know, he's a psychologist, like brilliant mind, an exceptional character. And he put together a load of basically a decision tree, which has now been loaded into the AI. And fundamentally, it understands what's happening over time to give a better outcome as to where it's trending towards, where there's a higher propensity for risk, where there's a higher propensity for burnout, where there's a higher propensity for turnover, low engagement, low productivity, high engagement, high productivity.
Yeah.
And so where we're moving towards with this is for the manager, it's very easily readable. You don't have to be an analyst to understand it. You can just see it in a dashboard very simply. And it's not like a load of it's not too much. It's just enough to go, okay, what's the general trend? Okay, that's happening there. Yeah, good. I can see that. It's not a platform which we want people to spend loads more minutes and hours of their day on. It's a quick check. If I need to see what's happening, I can go in, I can understand what's happening. Yeah. Where we're advancing it to, again, over the next month, is that we'll have an auto recommendation, but to all people. So making it very relevant and very almost like a curated response to each person that uses the platform, again, through a secondary AI aspect. And so that's giving them something back because they're using the data. So go watch this video because it's very pertinent to where you are in your journey at the moment. Go and speak to this manager X, go and speak to this person because they are heading towards burnout. There's a higher propensity that they're burning out. Give them half a day off, give them a day off. And these subtle recommendations, they're only recommendations, not advice, but they're recommendations to conduct action, as opposed to just go, here's the data, go do something with it. It's here's the data and here's the recommendation. I suppose that in many ways that's blended and evolved from where I used to operate within intelligence, where you would have all of these resources, bring them into one area and create this layered intelligence picture.
Yeah.
And off the back of that, you would then get your course of action. You know, I'd write the course of action, the recommendations, or the intelligence analyst that was in there with me as well would write the course of action, the recommendations. Here's what's happening and here's what we recommend you do about it. And by the way, here's what we think is going to happen if you go and do this thing.
Yeah, which is perfect, giving you the insight, right? In terms of that's what people want for that short, sharp, quick decision to go. You know, people don't want to be sat there going, right, it's great you're telling me all this information, but what do I do with it now? And yeah, if you can almost sort of think for them, right? We've become quite lazy in our ways of working and thinking with, as we talked about, sort of AI and machine learning, but it really helps us to try and go, okay, well, here are my options. This is what I think is the best course of action based on those, as you say, recommendations.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's using technology to aid the bits of the human element that we are.
Yeah.
You know, that and someone coined it really well the other day. And they said, what, so Loopin's kind of like that additional team member which checks to see if everyone's okay. And then when people are not okay, it just sends the notifications to the actual person to go and do something about it. I was like, yeah, it's actually a really good way. I'm going to start using that because that's a brilliant way of describing it.
That's the sales pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nailed the sales pitch. But it fundamentally is that. It's doing the bit where it's going, I can see everything that's going on. And when there's a problem occurring, I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to tell the right person about it so that we can fix that problem. So we don't have people going on long-term sick. We don't have people who are sort of eating themselves up that in 6 weeks' time, they're going to leave because they are just, there's no pressure valve. And that's the thing. That's the key thing about, you know, us humans, you know, we're half emotional and we're half logical. And for 10 or 15 hours a day, 8 or 10 hours a day, founders, 8 or 10 hours a day. I was
just going to say, yeah.
You're suppressing half of you because you're only expected to be logical at work.
Yeah.
But you can't also be emotional. you can't be fully emotional as well. And I think that we've got to strike a balance here. We've got to have enough emotional balance to go, this is how I'm feeling. Kids were up at 2, 3, 4 a.m. I'm feeling really like stressed. I'm probably going to be about 50% today. Just pressure valve off, done. Okay, I've got it. I understand it. And so does everyone else within your team. That means that they can support them in a way that you go, I can see that person is struggling today, so I might get a bit of extra workload from them. I'm going to take it on and I'll help them out, because I know when I'm struggling, that person's going to do the same for me.
Yeah, and that really is bringing that loops us back round to the start of the conversation, right? In terms of talking about how the Marines operate, and that creates that environment. So ultimately, I suppose that's sort of where a lot of that has perhaps come from. As you said earlier, it really does show that, you know, the idea is brought through from all of that experience that you had, saying there's this massive gap. So one of the things I also wanted to talk about, Anthony, before we sort of run out of time completely, was we touched on it briefly earlier. We're talking about sort of the discipline as part of the Marines, and I know that you and I spoke about this off air the other week when we were first talking, but the difference between being disciplined in the Royal Marines and being disciplined on the outside world. And generally the perception is that, oh, well, you've worked in the Marines, or you've worked in the, you know, the Army, the Navy, whatever, you know, any of the forces, you know, and you've had discipline ingrained in you from all of your training, which you will have done. But then, yeah, you're then going to come out into the real world and be disciplined as well. But I gather that's not always the case, and there are different disciplines in the real world comparatively to the ways of discipline is in the forces. So I was wanting to just talk about that a bit more, and if you could just tell me a bit more about the differences that you've seen between, I say, being in the forces and then the real world.
Yeah, and just to be super clear, that up until recently there was this really big perception that discipline is being disciplined.
Yeah, different.
And people couldn't understand it. Like, yeah, you were disciplined into being disciplined, and you're like, not really. No, it doesn't quite work like that. So discipline is primarily self-discipline. It's one of our core values. You know, alongside, you know, you've got the core values: excellence, integrity, self-discipline, humility. Those are like 4 out of the 8. And so this self-discipline piece is how do I become a self-disciplined person? And I think the skill of discipline is taught so well in the Marines to become disciplined at something. The differentiator is, how do you apply that discipline in something you know nothing about? So you can be disciplined in the wrong areas, and that isn't going to get you the results that you need. And I got challenged on that, quite rightly, by one of my coaches, my coach. And she said, well, you come from the most disciplined place in the world. Why are you not disciplined at doing this? I said, well, I've never been shown how to do it. So how can I be disciplined at something I don't know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I said, once I'm shown, I'll be very disciplined at doing it. And this understanding between us, okay, it kind of like the penny sort of dropped, that just because you have the skill of discipline, meaning you won't get out and you'll make sure that you're doing the actions that you know are the right actions in pursuit of what you're trying to achieve, you still need to be shown what actions those are. So you can do all of the personal stuff. You know, you build up good discipline and personal development discipline. And, you know, I'm doing the exercise, or I'm not at the moment, which is poor discipline on my behalf. But you're disciplined to eat well. You're disciplined to, you know, drink your 3 liters. And it's these mini disciplines which you are taught, which can set you up for success. So, and probably, how many times have I said discipline? Probably 20, 30 at least. Yeah, good. Let's
definitely about discipline right now.
Yeah. Let's get it up to 40. It's really difficult to be disciplined at something that you don't know. I think is the kind of like line I really want to, you know, ram home. Is yes, military people are fundamentally very disciplined, but show them the path, and then they'll be the most disciplined people at carrying out that path. And like you said earlier, in terms of the process, they'll be some of the most disciplined and process-driven people you'll ever have on your team, but just show them the path. And it won't take long. That's the thing. And of course, when being a founder, there's no handrails, there's no guidelines, there's no instructions. You see everything on Twitter and they go, make a unicorn immediately. And you go, well, I don't know how to get there, but I can see the summit. So I'll just do all this random activity to try and get up there. No one gives you the kit list. No one gives you the timings. And it's really challenging. But one of the things which I have sort of fell back on is the discipline of resilience. That is my sort of go-to thing. It's like, okay, the discipline of looking at the situation, going, what did I do wrong there? How could I have improved that? What could I have made better from that? Was it me? Because if it was me, I need to change that. And I think the discipline of being self-reflective, there's multiple different disciplines, and those disciplines make a huge difference in regards to being successful in what you do and not. And everyone can get disciplined. You know, that's the thing. I think you just have to commit to a few actions, and it's like a muscle. Yeah. You train the muscle of discipline, and guess what? You can do more things that then become a discipline. And it's kind of as you go along. Can't think of the word right now.
Yeah, well, it makes complete sense, and I think that as you say, it's picking those different sort of values as well that you may have if you're in that sort of unstructured environment as founders are. You come up, you've either you're doing it because you've either spotted a gap in the market, or you want to build something yourself, or even you might not have any other options. You're like, okay, well, great, I've got to go and build this something because I don't have any other options to do anything else. So I've got to go and build a business. And there is no sort of handbook for how you do that, as you say. So even by having that discipline of resilience, as you sort of coined it, I think that's a core thing that a lot of people can hopefully learn from, to say, well, that's the value to take into things of don't expect everything to be perfect. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect world. And you've just got to keep going, having that sort of never give up attitude, if you really want to do it, that is, of course.
Yeah. And I suppose in many ways, just to sort of finish on that point, is it's the discipline of continuous improvement. So if you're disciplined in continuous improvement, that I think in what you were saying there, that's what just sort of penny drop for me was just, yes, that's the thing which I've taken most, is to look at the situation and how to make it better, whether that's personally or professionally or both, or in the business, whatever it might be. But particularly in the business, is to go, how can we do that better? And that's the discipline to never give up on continuous improvement. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think that is a really great point to finish up the pod on the discussion, because hopefully that's a lot of information that people can learn from. First of all, thank you very much for coming on. If people want to reach out to you, they can find you on LinkedIn. Certainly if they're looking to increase employee engagement and looking to make sure that once they've spent all that money on recruitment fees with companies like us, that they can keep their employees and retain them, importantly, because it's a big thing. Make sure they should reach out to you and talk about your solution, because I genuinely think it could be a game changer that doesn't take up too much time for them, doesn't cost the earth, and will save them huge amounts of time and money in the long run.
Amazing. And Rupert, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to chatting again offline.
We'll have to have you back soon.
I'd love to.